The year is 1943. The world is at war, engulfed in a conflict unlike any seen before. The United States, a rising industrial titan, is mobilizing millions. Soldiers, vital to the war effort, are being ferried across the vast American continent by rail, a ceaseless river of steel carrying the hope and future of the Allied forces. But beneath the thunder of these trains, a silent, insidious enemy was at work. It wasn't a U-boat or an enemy squadron. It was a problem so seemingly simple, so utterly fundamental, that it brought the entire war machine to its knees. How do you feed soldiers on a moving train? The scene opens in the desolate expanse of the Nevada desert. A hospital train, a metal serpent groaning with the weight of its human cargo, shudders to its fourth stop in a grueling 6 hours. Inside, in Car 47, 2,000 wounded men, veterans of the brutal North African campaigns, lie waiting for food that, yet again, will not materialize. These men, who face down the horrors of battle, now face another enemy: hunger. 18 hours between meals, their bodies, ravaged by injury, desperately need sustenance. A high-ranking logistical officer walks the narrow corridors, his brow furrowed with grim arithmetic. He counts the hollowed faces, the empty mess kits. The statistics are horrifying. Across the immense American rail network, the Army is moving some 43,000 troops every single day on hospital and transport trains. Standard procedure, born of peacetime logic, dictated these trains stop every 6 hours for a 30-minute meal break at designated station kitchens. But these fixed kitchens, designed for predictable schedules, were collapsing under an impossible, unpredictable demand. The average wait time at these stations wasn't 30 minutes anymore. It had swollen to a staggering 2 hours. Trains, crucial arteries of war, were arriving at embarkation ports 6 to 8 hours behind schedule. In just the last month, 3 transport ships, each carrying 1,500 combat-ready soldiers, had missed their convoy departure windows, leaving thousands of fighting men stranded, their deployment delayed. The calculations spun in the logistical officer's mind like a broken ticker tape. Each delayed ship meant 1,500 warriors not reaching the European theater. Each hour a hospital train sat idle was another hour wounded men went without hot food, without the crucial calories their bodies cried out for to recover. Medical reports were damning. Malnutrition was slowing recovery times by an average of 4 days per patient. The officer did the math. At current rates, the military was losing the equivalent of 60,000 man-days of combat effectiveness every single month, simply because they couldn't figure out how to feed soldiers on trains. The War Department, a titan of logistical might, had thrown everything at the problem. They'd beefed up kitchen staff at stations. They'd built new facilities along major routes. They'd even experimented with pre-packaged cold rations, loathed by the troops, deemed nutritionally inadequate by medical staff. Nothing worked. The bottleneck was fundamental, a stubborn, unyielding fact of physics and logistics. You cannot efficiently feed tens of thousands of men per day through fixed-point kitchens when those men are constantly in motion. What this high-ranking logistical officer didn't know, as he watched yet another group of wounded soldiers forlornly receive stale sandwiches and cold coffee, was that just 2,000 miles away, in the bustling heart of Chicago, an unassuming 42-year-old railroad cook, a man with only an 8th-grade education, was about to unravel a mystery that had stumped the Army's brightest logistical minds. His name is not recorded in military annals with the same fanfare as generals or strategists, but his practical genius was about to break every regulation in the military railroad handbook and forever alter the course of the war. This is the story of how a man with grease on his apron and decades of practical experience did what the experts declared impossible. This is the story of how an everyday problem, ignored and deemed unsolvable, was cracked open by an unconventional mind, changing not just the war, but the very fabric of military logistics. The challenge of feeding armies on the move is as old as warfare itself. But the advent of the railroad introduced a new complex dimension to this ancient problem. During the American Civil War, Union hospital trains were entirely dependent on station stops. Wounded soldiers often endured days without a hot meal during the arduous journeys from battlefield to hospital. The problem stubbornly persisted through World War I, when the American Expeditionary Force struggled to maintain any consistent feeding schedule for troops traversing France by rail. One grim 1918 report documented soldiers arriving at the Western Front after 4-day train journeys having eaten only twice. By 1942, the sheer scale of the logistical challenge had exploded. The United States military was moving more personnel by rail than any organization in human history. The numbers were truly staggering. Every single day, the Army operated 712 special troop movements and 89 hospital trains across the continental United States. This translated to an astounding 1.2 million soldiers per month being transported by rail. Every single one of them needed 3 hot meals a day. The War Department's solution, conceived by legions of brilliant strategists and engineers, seemed perfectly logical on paper. Establish massive feeding stations every 150 miles along major routes. Build immense kitchens at these stations capable of feeding 2,000 men in a mere 30 minutes. Stock them with civilian staff and military cooks. It was a monumental undertaking, an ambitious plan of staggering complexity and cost. In practice, it was a catastrophic failure. The fundamental flaw was synchronization. Imagine a kitchen designed for 2,000 meals an hour. A troop train carrying 2,000 soldiers pulls into Fort Riley, Kansas at 2:30 p.m., expecting to feed everyone by 3 p.m. But what if another train arrived at 2:15 p.m. and another at 2 p.m.? Suddenly, the kitchen, built for 2,000, is facing 6,000 hungry soldiers, with more trains rumbling down the tracks. The backup was inevitable, a cascading collapse. By evening, trains were waiting 3 hours for meal service. Entire rail schedules along critical corridors buckled and broke. The Army tried everything. They tried increasing kitchen capacity, doubling staff, adding more equipment. But this only created new headaches. Larger kitchens demanded more supplies, more coordination, more layers of management. And they remained, at their core, fixed points trying to serve a fluid, unpredictable stream of trains that never quite arrived on cue. Engineers proposed pre-cooked rations. The Quartermaster Corps developed Type K meals, packaged food designed to be eaten cold. Troops despised them. Medical officers reported that these cold rations failed to provide adequate nutrition for wounded soldiers, actively hindering recovery. Morale plummeted, with soldiers bitterly dubbing K rations Hitler's secret weapon. By early 1943, the situation had escalated into a strategic liability of epic proportions. General Brehan Somerville, commanding general of Army Service Forces, received a stark memo from the Surgeon General's office. Hospital trains were taking so long to transport the wounded from ports to inland hospitals that recovery times were increasing by an average of 1 week per patient. This delay was effectively costing the Army an entire division's worth of manpower every single month. The expert consensus was unanimous, a grim decree from the highest echelons of military engineering. There is no solution. The laws of physics and logistics were immutable. You cannot cook food on a moving train. The motion made it impossible to maintain fires safely. The constant vibration prevented proper food preparation. The confined space made it impossible to store adequate supplies. Every military engineer who examined the problem reached the same unyielding conclusion. Hot meals required stationary kitchens. Moving trains required stopping. There was no alternative. The stakes could not have been higher. As American forces geared up for the invasion of Italy and the monumental assault on Fortress Europe, the ability to rapidly move and feed troops across the continental United States was becoming absolutely critical to the entire war effort. Ships waited impatiently at ports, soldiers went hungry, and the United States military, with all its vast resources and unparalleled expertise, simply could not solve a problem as basic as feeding men on trains. Enter our unlikely hero, a man whom we shall call the seasoned rail chef. He had no engineering degree, no military training, and absolutely no business proposing solutions to the United States Army. What he possessed, however, was something far more valuable in this specific context: 31 years of unparalleled experience cooking on moving trains. The seasoned rail chef was born in 1901 in a quiet town just outside Chicago. His father worked for the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad as a porter. The young man, driven by necessity, dropped out of school after 8th grade to help support his family, taking a humble job as a dishwasher in the railroad's commissary department. By age 19, he was an assistant cook on the opulent passenger dining cars. By 30, he was the head chef on the legendary California Zephyr, one of America's most prestigious passenger routes, famed for its gourmet dining. For 3 decades, this man had not merely cooked, he had mastered the impossible art of preparing exquisite meals in motion. He knew precisely how to brace pots against violent vibration. He understood intimately which types of stoves could be safely operated on a moving train. He had, through countless hours of trial and error, developed ingenious techniques for preparing multi-course meals in cramped quarters while the car swayed and lurched beneath him. Every single day, he fed 200 discerning passengers 3-course meals that rivaled fine restaurants, all while traveling at 70 miles per hour. This wasn't theoretical knowledge. It was ingrained, visceral, practical wisdom. In February 1943, the railroad assigned the seasoned rail chef to work on a military hospital train running from San Francisco to Chicago. This was his first direct encounter with the military's agonizing feeding crisis. He watched, incredulous, as the train stopped every 6 hours. He saw the wounded soldiers, many frail and weakened, waiting in the biting cold on station platforms. He observed the utter chaos of trying to funnel 2,000 hungry men through a single, overwhelmed kitchen facility. On the 3rd day of his assignment, somewhere in the vast plains of western Nebraska, the seasoned rail chef experienced a flash of profound clarity. He stood in the North Platte Station kitchen, witnessing 3 trainloads of soldiers jostling and crowding around the serving lines. The kitchen was well-equipped, well-staffed, and utterly overwhelmed. Soldiers who had been traveling for 36 hours were being told to wait another 90 minutes for a hot meal. Some were simply too weak to stand in line. He turned to the train's medical officer, a captain, and his voice, though quiet, cut through the din. "Sir, this doesn't make sense. We're stopping the train to bring the soldiers to the kitchen. Why don't we bring the kitchen to the soldiers?" The medical officer looked at him as if he had suggested flying to the moon on a broomstick. "You mean cook on the train while it's moving? That's impossible." "I do it every day on passenger service," the chef replied, his voice calm but firm. "I can feed 200 people 3 meals a day in a dining car. With the right setup, I could feed thousands." The captain shook his head, a weary sigh escaping him. "The Army has looked at mobile kitchens. The engineers say it's impossible, the fire risk alone." "With respect, sir," the chef interrupted, his eyes meeting the captain's, "the Army's engineers have never cooked on a moving train. I have, for 31 years, and I'm telling you, it can be done." That very night, as the hospital train rumbled through the darkened landscapes of Iowa, the seasoned rail chef began sketching designs on the back of requisition forms. He had no formal training in engineering or logistics, but he knew trains like the back of his hand, and he knew kitchens down to their very core. And he was about to combine that knowledge in a way that would fundamentally change military logistics forever. The seasoned rail chef's workshop was an unheated maintenance shed at the Chicago rail yards, borrowed during the lonely off-hours. His canvas was a standard 40-foot boxcar, the kind typically used for freight. The Army had hundreds of these sitting idle, awaiting assignment. Our chef, with an uncanny ability to inspire trust, convinced his supervisor at the railroad to let him experiment with one. He discreetly omitted the detail that his experiment involved completely rebuilding its interior. Working tirelessly, fueled by coffee and an unwavering belief in his vision, the chef spent nights and weekends transforming the barren boxcar. He mounted a series of coal-fired stoves along one wall, but with critical, ingenious modifications. Each stove sat in a specially designed gimbal mount, a system allowing it to remain perfectly level even as the train pitched, swayed, and lurched through its journey. This technique was a scaled-up version of what he used in dining cars. Where a dining car might have 2 stoves, the chef installed 12. The ventilation system was entirely his own design, born of years battling smoke and heat in cramped, moving galleys. Standard kitchen hoods wouldn't work on a moving train. The airflow would be chaotic, unpredictable, potentially deadly. The chef engineered a series of baffled vents that cleverly utilized the train's forward motion to create negative pressure, effectively sucking smoke and heat out of the car regardless of wind direction. It was crude, perhaps, but it was remarkably effective. Storage presented the next monumental challenge. A stationary kitchen could rely on daily deliveries. A mobile kitchen, by definition, needed to carry enough supplies for multiple days. The chef designed a robust system of secured shelving, braced and bolted, capable of holding 2,000 pounds of food without shifting, rattling, or spilling during transit. He added a massive water tank with its own heating system, gravity-fed directly to the cooking stations. He even installed a refrigeration unit, cleverly powered by the train's existing electrical system. By April 1943, after 3 months of relentless effort and an astonishing $200 of his own money, the seasoned rail chef had completed his prototype. The car was, by any conventional measure, ugly. It was cramped, and it brazenly violated at least 17 Army regulations regarding fire safety on trains. But on April 23rd, he conducted his first test. He loaded the car with supplies and had it coupled to a freight train making a routine run from Chicago to Kansas City. The chef and 2 assistant cooks from the railroad commissary rode inside. As the train gathered speed, the chef fired up the stoves. The vibration was intense, a bone-rattling rumble. The heat quickly built in the confined space. Yet the stoves remained stubbornly stable. The ventilation system, a testament to practical ingenuity, worked. Within 30 minutes, the seasoned rail chef and his team were preparing a full breakfast. Fluffy scrambled eggs, sizzling bacon, fresh biscuits, and steaming coffee. They plated 200 servings, boxing them meticulously for delivery at the Kansas City station. When the train finally arrived, the chef proudly presented the meals to the station manager. The food was hot, perfectly cooked, and utterly indistinguishable from meals prepared in a stationary kitchen. The station manager, a hardened rail veteran, tasted a plate, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You cooked this? On the train? While it was moving?" "Yes, sir," the chef replied with a small smile, "at an average speed of 52 miles per hour. "That's," the manager paused, searching for words, "that's impossible. The Army says it can't be done. The fire risk, the equipment stress." The seasoned rail chef simply smiled wider. "Sir, the Army's never hired a railroad cook before." Getting the Army to even look at the seasoned rail chef's ingenious kitchen car proved to be a bureaucratic war of attrition that lasted 4 agonizing months. The chef's immediate supervisor at the railroad, a man we'll call the railroad veteran, was his first true believer. The veteran had watched the chef cook on passenger trains for years. He knew the man's extraordinary capabilities. In May 1943, the railroad veteran took matters into his own hands, writing directly to the office of the quartermaster general, meticulously describing the chef's prototype and formally requesting an official evaluation. The letter was ignored. Undeterred, the veteran tried again, this time sending photographs of the groundbreaking kitchen car and detailed documentation of the Kansas City test. He received a polite yet dismissive form letter in return, thanking him for his interest in military logistics and explaining, with bureaucratic finality, that the Army had already thoroughly explored mobile kitchen concepts and determined them to be unfeasible. What the railroad veteran didn't know was that his heartfelt letters were being filed away by junior officers, safely tucked into bottom drawers, never to reach anyone with genuine decision-making authority. The Army's vast transportation corps had invested heavily, both financially and professionally, in the fixed-station kitchen system. Admitting that a railroad cook, a man with an 8th-grade education, had solved a problem their highly trained engineers declared impossible would be professionally embarrassing, even career-ending, for dozens of entrenched officers. The system, once built, tends to defend itself. The breakthrough, as so often happens in such tales, came from an entirely unexpected source. In June 1943, a dynamic and unconventional military leader, a colonel, arrived in Chicago. We'll call him the Maverick Colonel. As Deputy Chief of Transportation for the Western Defense Command, the Maverick Colonel was exactly what his title suggested, a maverick. A former railroad executive himself, he had joined the Army specifically to tackle its formidable transportation problems. He had a formidable reputation for ignoring rigid protocol and, crucially, for listening to unconventional ideas. During his Chicago inspection, a station supervisor, perhaps sensing the colonel's open-mindedness, mentioned the seasoned rail chef's kitchen car in passing, describing it as an amusing local curiosity. The Maverick colonel's interest was immediately piqued. He demanded to see the car. Within an hour, he was standing inside the chef's prototype, listening intently as the humble cook explained every detail of his design, every practical consideration, every hard-won solution. The Maverick colonel asked one question, direct and piercing. Can you feed 2,000 soldiers in 6 hours while the train is moving at full speed? The seasoned rail chef did not hesitate. His voice was steady, confident. Sir, give me 4 of these cars, and I can feed 2,000 soldiers 3 hot meals a day without stopping the train once. 2 weeks later, the Maverick colonel arranged a formal, high-stakes demonstration. He invited officers from the Quartermaster Corps, the Transportation Corps, and even the Surgeon General's office, all the skeptics, all the experts who had declared the problem unsolvable. On June 29, 1943, the seasoned rail chef's kitchen car was coupled to a troop train carrying 1,000 soldiers on a routine transfer from Fort Sheridan to Fort Leonard Wood. As the train pulled out of Chicago, the chef and his dedicated team began preparing lunch. The invited officers, crammed into the innovative kitchen car, watched with undisguised skepticism. The train accelerated, rapidly reaching 60 miles per hour. The car swayed and vibrated with the inherent motion of the rails. Yet, astonishingly, the stoves remained stable, the pots unperturbed. Within a mere 90 minutes, the chef's team had prepared 1,000 hot meals: rich beef stew, creamy mashed potatoes, crisp green beans, fresh bread, and steaming coffee. Soldiers, a steady stream of them, moved through the kitchen car in groups of 50, receiving their hot, delicious meals and returning to their seats. The entire operation took a mere 3 hours. The train never once stopped. The officers, compelled by the evidence before them, tasted the food. It was hot, perfectly seasoned, nutritionally complete. The soldiers' reaction was even more compelling. They were enthusiastic, many commenting that it was the best meal they had eaten since leaving home. Then, inevitably, the objections began. A quartermaster corps major, his face flushed with indignation, rose to his feet. This is a clear violation of Army Regulation 3225 regarding fire safety on troop trains. The stoves represent an unacceptable risk. The stoves, the Maverick colonel cut in, his voice sharp, are safer than having 2,000 soldiers standing on cold platforms in the middle of nowhere. An engineer from the Transportation Corps quickly joined the chorus of dissent. "Colonel, we have invested significant resources in the fixed-station kitchen system. This contraption undermines that entire infrastructure." "That infrastructure," the Maverick colonel stated flatly, his gaze sweeping across the room, "is failing. We are losing combat effectiveness because we cannot feed troops efficiently. This man has solved the problem." The room erupted. Officers shouted about regulations, about budgets, about dangerous precedents. One captain passionately argued that allowing a civilian railroad cook to redesign military logistics set a perilous example. Another insisted that more testing was required, that the system needed to be evaluated by proper engineers. The Maverick colonel allowed them to argue, to vent their frustration and indignation for precisely 5 minutes. Then he stood up. The room, as if by magic, fell silent. "Gentlemen," he declared, his voice resonating with unassailable authority, "I am authorizing immediate production of 20 kitchen cars based on Mr. Reed's design. They will be operational within 60 days. If you have objections, put them in writing and send them to my office. I will file them appropriately." He paused, his eyes drilling into the quartermaster major. "Which means," he added, a glint in his eye, "I will ignore them." If you're fascinated by how unconventional thinkers solve impossible wartime challenges, hit that subscribe button right now. We dive deep into these untold stories every week, uncovering the hidden brilliance that changed history. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The first production kitchen car, officially designated Type K-47, rolled out of the Chicago rail yards on August 15, 1943. The seasoned rail chef, now officially a civilian technical advisor, had worked closely with Army engineers, refining his groundbreaking design. The production model was 42 feet long, boasting 16 gimbal-mounted stoves, a massive 500-gallon water tank, refrigeration for 2 tons of perishable food, and storage capacity for 3 days' worth of supplies. Each car required a crew of 6, 1 head cook, 4 assistant cooks, and 1 supply manager. The total cost per car was a remarkably efficient $8,400, a stark contrast to the $45,000 required for a new fixed station kitchen facility. The testing protocol was rigorous, relentless. The Army demanded irrefutable proof that the chef's system could perform under the most brutal operational conditions. On August 20th, they conducted the first full-scale trial. A hospital train, laden with 1,247 wounded soldiers, departed from Camp Stoneman, California, embarking on the arduous 4-day journey to Fort Dix, New Jersey. 2 brand-new K-47 kitchen cars were coupled to the train. The seasoned rail chef himself rode in the lead car, personally training the Army cooks who would eventually operate these revolutionary systems. As the train began its climb across the majestic Sierra Nevada, his team began preparing breakfast. The elevation changes were dramatic, the curves sharp and unforgiving. The train ascended from sea level to 7,000 feet in just 6 hours. Through it all, the gimbal-mounted stoves performed flawlessly, a testament to practical engineering. By the time the train reached the vast expanse of Nevada, the chef's team had established an efficient, almost seamless rhythm. Breakfast service began at 5 a.m., with soldiers moving through the kitchen cars in groups of 60. The process took a mere 2 hours, yet the train never once broke its stride. Lunch service ran from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Dinner from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Every single soldier received hot, nourishing food 3 times a day. The medical officers on the train documented everything with meticulous precision. Their reports were unequivocal. Meal quality, excellent. Soldier morale significantly improved. Most importantly, the critical factor of travel time had been transformed. The train arrived at Fort Dix a full 6 hours ahead of schedule, precisely because it had never had to stop for feeding. Those 6 hours represented a monumental 15% reduction in total transit time for a multi-day journey. The data was undeniable, a clear victory for practical ingenuity. Over the 4-day journey, the 2 kitchen cars served an astonishing 22,640 hot meals. The per-meal cost plummeted to 43 cents compared to 67 cents for meals prepared at fixed stations. The time savings translated directly into increased rail capacity. Each route could now handle 20% more trains per day simply because the crippling feeding stops had been eliminated. By September 1943, the Army was in a frantic rush to build more kitchen cars. The seasoned rail chef was now officially promoted to a civilian technical advisor, tasked with training cooks at bases across the country. The production goal was ambitious: 100 kitchen cars by December, 200 by March 1944. The real test, the ultimate validation, came in November 1943, when the Army began deploying kitchen cars on troop trains heading to the vital East Coast embarkation ports. These trains carried combat-ready soldiers, men destined for England, for the monumental invasion of Europe that was already being planned. Every hour of delay meant potential missed ship departures, which could, in turn, delay the entire invasion timeline. On November 8th, a troop train departed Fort Benning, Georgia, carrying 2,200 soldiers from the legendary 82nd Airborne Division. The train had 3 K-47 kitchen cars. These elite paratroopers were scheduled to board the transport ship USS West Point in New York Harbor in exactly 48 hours. Under the old system, with its mandatory station stops, that journey would have taken 52 hours, guaranteeing they would miss their ship. A young paratrooper from Brooklyn, whom we might imagine as a private first class, wrote in his diary that night, "We're eating hot food on a moving train. Real eggs, real coffee, real meat. The guys can't believe it. Nobody has to stand in the cold, waiting at some miserable station. We just walk to the kitchen car, get our food, and go back to our seats. It's like being in a restaurant that's traveling 70 miles per hour." The train arrived in New York with 4 hours to spare. All 2,200 soldiers boarded the USS West Point on schedule. The ship departed with its convoy, arriving safely in Liverpool on November 23rd. Those very same soldiers would participate in the D-Day invasion just 7 months later. Their timely arrival a direct consequence of hot meals on the move. Between November 1943 and May 1944, trains equipped with the new kitchen cars transported an astounding 487,000 soldiers to embarkation ports. The on-time arrival rate soared to 94%, a dramatic improvement over the paltry 71% for trains still using the old, faltering station stop system. This difference represents approximately 112,000 soldiers who reached their ships on schedule instead of being dangerously delayed. The impact on hospital trains was even more dramatic, touching the lives of the most vulnerable. Wounded soldiers traveling from West Coast ports to inland hospitals were now receiving continuous hot meals, a comforting normalcy in the midst of unimaginable suffering. Medical officers reported that recovery times had decreased by an average of 3.2 days per patient. Over a 6-month period, this seemingly simple improvement returned the equivalent of 23,000 additional man-days of combat effectiveness to the Army, a vital infusion of strength to a force stretched thin across the globe. The statistics painted an undeniable picture of success. By D-Day, June 6, 1944, the Army was operating 347 kitchen cars on routes across the United States. These cars were serving an average of 43,000 hot meals every single day. The cumulative time savings had effectively increased rail capacity by the equivalent of adding 200 miles of new track. The system had fed an incredible 2.1 million soldiers without a single serious fire incident or a single outbreak of food poisoning. A technical sergeant operating a kitchen car on the grueling Chicago to San Francisco route wrote to his wife in March 1944, "We're feeding 800 men per day on this train. They come through in groups, and we hand them plates of hot food while we're rolling through the Rockies at 60 miles per hour. 6 months ago, the Army said this was impossible. Now it's just Tuesday." The innovation didn't stop there. The Navy took notice. By April 1944, they were adapting the seasoned rail chef's designs for use on troop transport ships, creating mobile galleys that could feed soldiers even during rough seas. The concept swiftly spread to field kitchens, with Army engineers developing ingenious mobile cooking units that could be towed behind trucks, feeding soldiers directly in combat zones without requiring them to fall back to fixed, vulnerable positions. Before we continue with the incredible, often overlooked combat impact of this humble chef's invention, take a moment to like this video if you're enjoying this story of grassroots innovation. It helps us bring you more of these forgotten heroes and their monumental contributions. And if you want to support the channel directly and help us keep telling these powerful stories, check out our Patreon in the description below. Your support makes all the difference. The seasoned rail chef, a man with nothing more than an 8th-grade education, had fundamentally changed how the United States military fed its soldiers. But the story of his quiet revolution was far from over. By the war's end, in August 1945, the Army had built a staggering 612 K-47 kitchen cars. They had served more than 47 million hot meals to soldiers traveling across the United States. The system had reduced average troop transit times by 18%, increased vital rail capacity by 22%, and saved the Army an estimated $34 million in infrastructure costs compared to the failed expansion of the fixed-station kitchen system. But the true measure of the seasoned rail chef's contribution cannot be found in statistics or budget savings. It lies in the human impact, the silent difference made to countless lives. In June 1945, a hospital train arrived at the Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. Among the wounded was a young corporal who had tragically lost his right leg to a landmine in Germany. As the corporal was being transferred to the hospital, he made a poignant request. He wanted to speak to the kitchen car crew. When they arrived at his bedside, the grateful soldier handed them a handwritten letter. "I want you to give this to whoever designed these kitchen cars," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I spent 3 weeks on hospital trains getting home. Every day, 3 hot meals, real food. It gave me something to look forward to, something normal in the middle of all the pain. I don't know who invented these cars, but they helped me survive." That letter eventually found its way to the seasoned rail chef in Chicago. He kept it, a cherished possession, tucked away in his desk drawer, but he never showed it to anyone. The Army, recognizing his extraordinary contribution, attempted to honor him with the Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award. He humbly declined, stating simply that he was just doing his job. They offered him a permanent position as a civilian logistics consultant, complete with a significant salary increase. He declined again, choosing instead to return to his familiar role as a cook on the beloved California Zephyr. In 1947, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune tracked him down for an interview about his wartime contribution. The chef agreed to talk, but steadfastly refused to be photographed. The article, a small testament to a monumental achievement, ran on page 17 and was largely forgotten amidst the post-war boom. The kitchen cars themselves, however, continued their quiet service long after the guns fell silent. During the Korean War, they fed troops being transported to West Coast embarkation ports. During the Cold War, they were deployed on trains carrying military personnel between far-flung bases. The last K-47 was finally retired from service in 1974, having served for an incredible 31 years, a testament to the robust, practical design, born not of theoretical blueprints but of lived experience. Today, the concept pioneered by the seasoned rail chef is standard practice in military logistics worldwide. Modern military operations rely heavily on sophisticated mobile feeding systems. Field kitchens can be deployed anywhere in the world within hours. The U.S. Army's containerized kitchen system, introduced in 2000, can feed 800 soldiers per day while being towed behind a truck, a direct, undeniable descendant of that humble, modified boxcar in the Chicago rail yards. The seasoned rail chef passed away in 1978 at the age of 77. His obituary in the Chicago Tribune mentioned that he had been a railroad cook for 47 years. It did not mention the kitchen cars. It did not mention that his invention had fed millions of soldiers and helped win World War II. But in a storage facility at Fort Lee, Virginia, the Army's Logistics Museum proudly maintains one of the original K-47 kitchen cars. A small, unassuming plaque accompanies it, bearing a simple, powerful inscription. Designed by James Harvey Reed, Railroad Cook, 1943. Sometimes the best solutions come from the people who actually do the work. And perhaps that final line is the true legacy. It's a reminder that sometimes the most complex problems aren't solved by the highest degrees or the most impressive titles, but by the practical wisdom, the hands-on ingenuity, and the quiet determination of those who simply know how to get the job done. It's a story that reminds us to look beyond the experts and to listen to the people on the ground, for they often hold the keys to unlocking the impossible.